Aaron, yeah, and then Randy.
Randy, I don't think will be here. He may, but Regina was having surgery.
I'm gonna wait to shoot two people in your administration out.
Woman stuff.
Oh, the woman's
Is
good.
all of this coming up tonight?
Actually, she.
Okay.
I'd like to call to order this September 12th, 2017 meeting of the Ascension Parish Council Finance Committee. At this time, I'd like to ask Ken Dawson if he would lead us in the invocation, followed by the pledge. If you'll please stand and remain standing.
Let us pray. Father, again, we thank you for watching over us and protecting us during the recent events of these storms. We thank you for watching over Ascension Parish, but we do ask that you bless those that are going through the crisis of the flooding and the wind and the aftermath of such a storm as Harvey and Irma. We pray that you give them strength, and any of those that are going from Ascension to help them, that you also, oh God, allow them to be such a benefit to them that they see just such a manifestation of your love and presence in the hearts of the people from Ascension. As we do the people business tonight, we ask for your wisdom and guidance so that we will do the people business well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to make mention that Councilman Travis Turner is not present, Councilman Randy Kluwat is not present, and Councilman Aaron Lawler is not present. There are no chair's additions at this time to the agenda. If you would like to make a comment on any item, you can see the secretary, get a red or a green card, fill those out, and the secretary will pass them to me, and we will recognize you at the appropriate time. At that time, you'll have 3 minutes in which to comment. General business tonight. Item number 5, a financial presentation by the West Ascension Hospital District.
Good evening. My name is Mike LeBlanc. I'm with the CPA firm Postlethwaite in Netterville. We audit the financial statements of the West Ascension Hospital Service District, Prevost Memorial Hospital. So I'm going to be brief. I'm going to go over last year's financial statement. Their fiscal year ends in August. You don't have that in front of you. I've given you just a snapshot of what their budget looks like, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Their financial statement at the end of August 31st, 2016, we had a clean opinion on their financial statement. We had a couple of internal control issues. Number one, the staff's not large enough to segregate duties, so we suggested that they do some things to kind of to do some oversight at a higher level, just to kind of make sure that the person who can do everything is looked at a little bit. It's just a staffing issue. The second one was there were some bank reconciliation issues at the end of the year. They had a changeover in bookkeepers from one to the other right at the end of the fiscal year, and it caused them to lag in reconciling some bank accounts. And so we have assisted them with catching that up, and so that finding has been taken care of. Their balance sheet is a strong balance sheet. Of course, strengthened a lot in the last few years with the tax revenues related to the CF expansion and other expansion in and around the Donaldsonville, West Ascension area. The balance sheet was about $24 million of total assets, of which about $20 million of that was either in cash or investments, and the other $3 to $4 million was the investment in the hospital itself. What's that?
Do we have the balance?
You do not have a balance sheet. I can provide that to you at a later time if you would like.
Yes, I would.
Okay. There's no debt. The unrestricted net position, or the unrestricted fund balance, was a little over $20 million at the end of the year. The profit and loss statement, profit and loss generates about $5.8 to $6 million in revenue in a good year. Salaries and benefits, and operating costs, medical supplies, drugs, other operating costs, depreciation on the hospital, generally runs about $6.8 million, and So the hospital, from an operational standpoint, loses anywhere between 800,000 to $1.2 million in a given year, depending on revenues that have happened during the year. Sales tax then comes in, and the earnings on their investments helps to float the hospital and keep it in a positive position. Investment earnings for the year 2016 were a little over $1 million, and that included the appreciation on the investments that they have in their portfolio. Sales tax generated in that particular year was a little over $3.5 million. Of course, the last several years have been total extraordinary years of the sales tax collection, which I'm sure you all know. I'm not going to go through the financials anymore. I will get any of you copies that you would like. The colorful sheet that you have in front of you is just kind of giving you an idea of where we are today. And this is 11 months through July 31st. The first column is our budget for 11 months, and then the actual revenues collected. You'll notice revenue adjustments. I think some folks have maybe had some questions about that. In the healthcare industry, revenue adjustments are not abnormal. If you go to the doctor or you go to the hospital and they charge you a full charge, and then there's a discount applied after your insurance company negotiates with the hospital, those are the types of adjustments that we're talking about, in addition to the fact that Medicaid doesn't necessarily pay full price, nor does Medicare, and so forth. So the adjustments are typical, and they're generally accepted accounting principles for showing the revenue at gross and then showing what you actually give up in other costs, or in other revenue, rather, related to caps that are placed on types of service and so forth. So that's not abnormal in a hospital financial statement. Operating expenses through this point, a little bit under budget, 6.7 compared to our budget of 6.8. So we were budgeting about a $688,000 loss from operations this year. We're at about 807 at the end of July. Our interest income is expected to be a little over $400,000, and sales tax revenue is a little over $1.7 million at the end of July. The far two columns out to the right are the budget columns for both 8/31/17 and 8/31/18. There's obviously a lot of detail that goes into the preparation of these, so I've just given you a high level. I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any, because Vince is also going to give you a presentation as well on some of the plans that they have for the surplus that the hospital has at the moment.
Certainly. Mr. Dawson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Look, as first, let's make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So if I look at the first column, your actual column up through July 31st, 2017, you had about 1.7 million in sales tax revenue, and that's from your half cent.
That's
the
correct.
half cent tax, is that correct? And the loss from operations was 800,000 up to July 31st.
Yes, sir.
And so what does that mean? That you used about half of the sales tax to make up that loss?
That and the interest income that we generate off of the investments. So, yeah.
Well, if I don't have the income in that.
Yeah,
you do.
Yeah, it's right underneath the.
Well, I know that,
income loss
but you got 8,000. Can I talk to Mr. LeBlanc?
You can.
Had 800,000 as a loss.
Sure.
And then you had 1.7 million as the revenue from the sales tax. So it was about half. The loss was about half of
That's
the
correct.
sales tax.
Yeah.
So then in the budget for 2018, is there any capital money in that?
There may be some capital money in the budget. It won't necessarily show in this budget because the capital outlay is not like a governmental entity. A hospital operates more like a business, so it's not going to run through the P&L.
But if they're forecasted capital expenditures,
There's
are
not-
they or are they not in these numbers?
They're not in these numbers. They're not in.
So
these
this
numbers.
doesn't capital
That's correct.
expenditure. So that's what Mr.
That's what
Cataldo is
Vince
going
will
to talk
tell
to
you.
us about
Yeah.
later. Have you audited these for several years? Postal Wait has
Yes,
done
we
this
have.
for several years.
Yes,
Okay.
we have.
So I went back to some of the previous reports, and I'm catching you a little bit off guard here, and I do apologize. But if I look at 2013,
Mhm.
there was a they call it a decrease in net position. I'd call it a loss of $570,000 for that year.
That would be correct.
Does that ring a bell with you?
Yeah, it doesn't ring a bell. I haven't been involved with this account for a number of years, but if the financial statements show a negative net position, that is a net loss.
Okay. And then if you get down into the details, and they've got non-operating revenues, expenses, they've got an investment earnings loss of $668,880.
That would be again, in the type of accounting that we have to do, we mark the investments to market each year. So it would have been that maybe the investments that they had, from a fair market value standpoint, were not worth what they paid for them. But as long as they hold them to maturity, they will not necessarily realize those losses. But the fact, it's just like anything else. If I buy a bond at 3%, and the market goes against me and rates go up, my 3% bond is not worth what it was before.
I mean, isn't that part of the standard accepted accounting procedures
Correct.
to mark to market?
That's correct, yes. And so that's
So
what's
we
done.
wouldn't know whether this 607,000 was an actual loss or mark to market.
I wouldn't know that off the top of my head tonight, but I can certainly tell you
Okay.
that.
But even if it were a mark to market, what it means is that the investments at this point in time were worth, this says earnings.
It's combined with earnings. That number is combined with the fair market value adjustment.
Okay. Well, I guess to me, it just says that there was an earnings loss on the investment of 600. Now, how would that happen? I mean, would that happen, for
Well, it would
example,
happen-
they
it would
bought some long-term
It would happen
bonds?
either because you sold a loss, or with generally accepted accounting principles, that you had investments that weren't worth what you paid for them because the market worked against you. So
Right.
either way would result in a loss on your financial statements.
Right. Okay, so I'd like to get some clarification on it, is there
I can do that.
would be a significant difference if, either way, though, it was a loss, because even if you invested, so I see in some previous, and I don't know if this was part of yours or not, I see in some of the previous reports, they talked about term risk, and I suspect that that's kind of part of this, is that there were too many long-term investments
Right.
versus short-term investments, and got caught in
And
an
that may have
interest rate
been, I mean,
increase.
if you look at our last financial statement in August of 16, there was $1 million gain on the same line that you're talking about. So in that sense, the market would have worked in their favor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Joseph.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you for coming. My question is, the sales tax revenues. And as I can see, you budget for 1.8, in 2017, you budget for 1.9, in 2018, 1.9 million in that. And you're only losing what you call loss in operation is about $800,000. That surplus has been growing every year for the last 20-something years. What have you recommended they do with that surplus from a point of view of finance?
We haven't necessarily recommended that they do anything with their surplus. Their surplus is there, hopefully, for the good of the hospital and the residents on that side of the river, and to provide medical care. So presumably, they would do improvements to the hospital. They would, add equipment that was necessary, get more up to date. The building was built in 1966, so it's in need of some renovations. So presumably, that's what some of the money would be spent on. We're not necessarily in the business of telling them what to do with the money that they have. We audit it to make sure that it's accounted for appropriately. So,
Well, I'd like to comment you just stated, because we are in the business of recommending what we do with surplus, and if it benefit the public, and what surplus can do. Can we lower the taxes, or do they need an increase in taxes? Once again, in my mind, this tax that the hospital been getting for over the 37 years, it shows that we've really been charging the people in this taxing district over too much because it's surplus. I mean, if you wanted to do anything, the hospital board wanted to do anything, they would have went back to the people to lower it and say we have a submission of funds. But I didn't see that, and so I just want to know what was your recommendation on it. You know, if you ever recommend it, and you didn't.
No, I don't.
So,
And
okay.
of course, a lot of the surplus occurred within the last several years. Obviously, the CF expansion
No,
generated a significant amount
No.
of sales tax.
no. You might have looked back for the last 3 years, if you look back for the last,
No, I'm not saying they
36
did, I'm not
years.
saying they didn't have a lot of it was generated within the last several years.
that's all right.
Mr. Satterly?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. LeBlanc, I'm not quite sure if this question differs from Mr. Joseph's or even my rude interruption of my colleague, my esteemed colleague, Mr. Dawson. I didn't mean it other than to let you know that in this little thing you gave us, there is an interest income information. But so, topping on the dropping, an old poultry professor. So sales taxes and return on investment, you call it interest income, keeps them, the hospital, in the black, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, question becomes, by how much, and do you view, even though you're not prone or even obligated in any way to advise this body how that should be spent, do they have, just in your opinion, a significant surplus? And my follow-up question, what would that total amount be beyond the 831.17 projected number in your handout, as well as the 831.18 number, which is a full year away, which you project another close to $7 million? Is that greatly from OJ's question, or?
Kind of does. Well, let's address your last question first as far as the surplus would go. Yes, absolutely, it's projected to increase over the next couple of years. But again, Mr. Cataldo is going to give you guys a presentation when I complete on the renovations that he's expecting to do to the hospital over the course of the next couple of years. So some of that surplus, and maybe a substantial portion of it, may be spent on some of those renovations.
Excuse me, interrupt. Can you give us a cumulative number, though, for how much here's the way of looking at it, how much do they have in the bank total, projected to 831.18 if they realize a full 1.7 million more and nothing is spent?
That's difficult to do because I'm not sure what the capital outlay is going to be, but the amount they had in the bank at the end of August 31st, 2016.
But surely, sir, it's not going to be, the capital outlay is not going to be greatly different than what they did last year, right?
I don't know what it's going to be.
Okay.
I mean, again, Mr. Cataldo is going to talk to you a little bit more about that.
I'm done, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
You're quite welcome, Mr. Lambert. Okay. So I wanted to get back to how much was in the bank at the end of last year?
The actual bank accounts totaled $2,292,000, and in the investment accounts, they had $17,304,000.
Okay. And how many employees are the hospital?
Ooh, I'm not exactly sure. Vince could answer that better than I would.
Okay. I'll get back to that one then. And could you answer a question about the average daily census?
No.
Okay. That's it for me for now. Thank you. Any other questions on this side? Mr. Lambert?
Yeah, I'm just looking back at when they brought it to our attention, I guess 6 months back. I know there was quite a few renovations that needed to be done to the hospital, a roof, and a lot of the doors that's inside the hospital are too narrow to run wheelchairs through, and so there are a lot of renovations, and I call it good business, to manage your money to prepare for these repairs. We have the same thing with our libraries. They have a pretty good budget, but they're focused for what they need down the road for new libraries and expansions and whatever it takes to keep up with the going pace of the parish. So You know, I know 17 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you start renovating a 1966 hospital, it's gonna take a big chunk. I don't call it a surplus, I call it just wise managing of money, you know, for the citizens of the parish, especially the West Bank. That's all I have, Madam Chairman.
Anything else, gentlemen? Okay, that's, gentlemen, do you need a second round on this end?
No, Mr. Cataldo coming out.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Good
Good
evening,
evening.
sir.
My name is Vince Cataldo. I'm the administrator of Prevost Memorial Hospital. I'd like to give y'all a little overview of what we plan to do with the money that we have. It's Prevost Memorial Hospital's building program, opinion of probable cost of existing building renovations and remodeling. To replace the entire roof of the hospital, it's in progress now, been delayed with rain, the weather, but it's $574,000. To renovate the mammography room for a new 3D mammography,
Do we have that? Do we have that written? Is that a report submitted?
Nope.
Do you have that in a presentation form for our review, Mr.
I don't have a
Patel?
copy for everyone, no ma'am, I just got it minutes ago.
Okay.
Few minutes ago?
Well, can
But I'll
you
be glad
provide
to
us with
send
a
you one.
copy? Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, to remodel the mammography room, $7,000. Asbestos abatement for the existing patient wing is $333,000. To renovate the patient wing is $3,843,000. To renovate the remainder of the 1966 hospital, $4,014,000. Renovations, this does not include the emergency room, which was built in 2010. The total probable cost for existing building remodeling and renovations is a total of $8,792,000. Probable cost for providing new added buildings and added parts to buildings. New added storage building, $415,000. New added medical office building with new covered walkway attaching to the hospital, $4,741,000. New added physical therapy room, $150,000. New added physical therapy covered open area for exercising, $99,000. New added lobby and business office, $317,000. New rear electrical room, $39,000. Total probable cost for new added buildings and facilities, $5,764,000. Total probable remodeling and renovations of new construction cost, $14,556,000. Total architectural fees, $1,042,000. Total probable hospital building cost, $15,598,000. Miscellaneous owners, building, equipment, and site cost for the mammography 3D machine is $357,000. Cost of owner's soil foundation boring, $7,300. Cost of owner's survey of the property, $8,250. Total owner separate cost for the above, $372,000. Grand total, $15,971,000. In the above budgeted opinion of probable hospital costs does not include the cost of fixtures and furnishings. All of the above costs for new beds, stretchers, chairs, tables, couches, nightstands, TVs, microwaves, refrigerators, and similar miscellaneous hospital items. If the Ascension Parish Civil Engineer Drainage Study is required by the Ascension Parish government for stormwater runoff, you can add another $25,000 to that. I thank y'all. Do y'all have any questions?
Oh, I'm sure. Woo! Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all.
Do we want to start on the other end this time?
Mr. Cadell,
Mr. Vince.
Yeah.
But
Mr. Joseph.
yeah, Mr. Cadell, that sound very exciting over on the West Bank. But can you answer that? How many patients you have at the current hospital right now per month that you keep overnight?
It's not many, but would you want to be in a
How
facility?
many?
Would you want to be in a facility that look like that?
How many?
Probably patients a month in the hospital, but we're doing 800 in the emergency room a month.
But you're doing all the expansion. You already did the expansion in the emergency room a couple of years ago, which is a great facility.
Would you want to be a doctor practicing at
How many doctors do you have on staff?
I know you're going to be shocked, but probably 25. They're on staff if they work the ER, that's 24-hour coverage. I got the 3 from across the street, and I have consultants. I mean, you have to have a pathologist, you have to have a radiologist. You know, it's hard to get into a field that you've never worked in before and ask questions.
So the grand total, what you're doing, you're going to use 90% of the funds you have now for the upkeep.
You said earlier that it's going to keep coming in. Come on in, we'll take care of it. And we'll deliver health care to your constituents.
How long
West
will it
Bank
take
of the
this
river.
plan, how long will it take this plan to be implemented over the years?
Within 2.5 years, we'll be pretty much there. Because these numbers are real. They were-
Well, we don't know if they're real because we haven't seen them. We only seen what you, heard what you read off. And we would, I know personally, I would like to have somebody evaluate those numbers to see how consistent those numbers are.
Well, they've been evaluated by some of the best. One of the largest construction companies in this area looked over these, and their estimator looked over the numbers, and they're current. They're by one of the best architects that I ever met, and his name is Henry Chauvin.
Well, once again, I don't want no statement on Mr. LeBlanc back there, but he came up here and gave a report, and he said he just recently started looking at these books. So, once again,
Okay, well,
everyone that you have brought in front of us, this is my opinion, from the last meeting we had, they always got that information at the last minute, and they came up with reports at the last minute. You stated tonight, you just got it. You just got those numbers.
Well, I asked someone to work for me because he's the architect that's actually working with the plans and coordinating all these activities.
So once again, how consistent those numbers are, I'm just me curious, I would love to see them, and then have them analyzed to see if they are good numbers.
Okay, well, you'll have it by tomorrow, send it to the parish government's office.
Please do. Thank you.
No problem with that.
Mr. Dawson?
Okay. You brought some numbers. When was that we approved the resolution? That was like February?
February the 2nd at the courthouse.
So you had $20 million of forecasted capital expenditures on a piece of paper similar to that when you came.
That wasn't nearly as thorough as this.
It was a full-size sheet of paper.
It didn't involve any contractors. There was contractors and estimators.
I'm curious, and I don't know, I should have asked Mr. LeBlanc this, but I've never seen a budget. Usually the capital and operating budgets are either combined or they're separated and issued on a consolidated sheet. But what you presented to us on the budget, you tell me there's no capital expenditures or capital outlays in that budget at all. Do you make a budget? Where's your capital budget for this year and next year?
I'm told by the CPA that doesn't get put into the audit until the building is complete.
I'm not concerned about the audit. Do you have a budget? Do you have a capital budget?
I don't have time, no, sir.
You don't have a budget
But I
for
have the funds to do the
2017?
work.
You don't have any budget for 2017 or
Not a
2018?
not a capital expenditure budget. I have an operating budget, which is required and approved every July board meeting to be utilized for September 1.
So you're telling us you're going to have this completed in 2.5 years. So you're going to spend $15+ million in 2.5 years, and you don't have a budget for next year, a capital budget?
I don't have a capital budget at this time.
You just got it, Bill.
If I go to, I'm going to switch streams on you a bit. So if I look at the Louisiana law, and I look at revised statute 46-1057, and it's got duties of director. Is that is your position, director of the hospital?
That'll be correct.
Okay. So there are 11 duties here that are outlined. Now, would you say that these are things that you must do, if you call that a duty of a director in the state law?
I would think so, yes.
Okay. Number 6 says to prepare an annual budget for approval by the commission and the police jury. So have you brought this to us before? Have you ever brought a budget to us before? Are you bringing a budget for our approval now?
A budget has never been requested by any parish government.
Well, this is
Before
state law.
you-
We don't have to request state law.
I didn't do it.
Yes, you do.
Are you bringing it tonight?
No, sir, I just told you I have a budget, but not a capital expenditure budget. I have an operating budget.
So did you bring a budget for us to
I'll get you-
approve
I'll get
tonight?
you one tomorrow.
And that'll include the capital?
It won't include the capital by tomorrow, no, sir. That'll take some time to work that out.
So has your board approved this, a budget? Has the commission approved a budget?
Only the operating budget.
It doesn't approve the capital budget?
They don't approve a capital budget.
Who approves that? You?
I'm
Just
sorry.
you?
No, I didn't. I don't have one.
Who approves the capital budget?
No one. It doesn't exist.
When you have one, hopefully you will have one, who approves it?
Well, it's gonna have to be the board. They approve everything.
Okay. And then it has to come here.
Is any other public body doing that for y'all?
Yeah?
Okay.
You
I've never been notified.
You bet.
Well, you ignored the law.
Yeah, I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Satterley?
Madam Chairman and Mr. LeBlanc, at the risk of whipping a dead dog, your probable cost, your words, for the building program, roof replacement, mammography, I was able to capture. You were going very fast. Asbestos abatement, patient wing, another major renovation. I didn't capture the exact title, almost $8 million. Storage facility, medical offices, a couple more in there for 150 and 99K respectively. Again, I couldn't capture it. You were going very fast. Patient lobby, electrical room, we're up now to another 5.764 million, I believe you said, sir. You then talked about a bunch more, and I think we totaled out 14.5 million plus architect fees, 15.598 million, and then we somehow got to nearly 15.97 million in total. That's 16 million of the I believe you told Councilman Lambert there's that amount or a little bit more out there, and although I believe I recall it to be closer to 20 million. All of that notwithstanding, I fear I have to side with Councilman Dawson and Councilman Joseph. I mean, you're serving 3.4, you said, patients a month, even with the 25 doctors in your ER on staff and so forth. This is a whole lot of money. And when one considers that Louisiana Revised Statute 46-1057, as Mr. Dawson said, has these 11 duties in it, number 6 of which says that you or your counterpart needs to present us a budget, I find it very hard to really respond to help you, at least tonight. You may send a whole bunch more things in tomorrow, the next day, whatever, to have any great amount of empathy for your plight. Now, I'm not against in any way treating people who need to be treated the best we can. But more and more, as you well know, sir, it's becoming a real problem in government, local, state, and federal, to get maximum bang for the buck. And we got to be sure that, you know, since we are involved in either directly or indirectly holding the purse as this parish council, replacement to our former police jury, that we're doing the right thing. So I would highly encourage you to deliver upon the promises you just made to Mr. Dawson and Mr. Joseph before we proceed further. And I don't know if this requires, Madam Chairman, any action tonight or what, but I will be on record tonight to say, with all of the things I just listed and some that I couldn't even capture, with all due respect, sir, I have concern. Thank
Well,
you for listening.
I would like to just make one statement. We have the only beds on the west bank of the river between Luling and New Roads, Louisiana. And I think the people on the west bank of the river deserve something, and that's their money, and we're going to give them something.
No argument. I don't argue that.
Okay. Let a budget stop us from giving something to the west bank of the
Mr.
river.
LeBlanc, I'm not into whose money it is. If I'm charged in
Okay,
any way
gentlemen.
to decide how it
I
should be
don't mean to
spent.
offend you, Doc, I'm just telling you
okay.
how we feel.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Do you have any comments or questions, Dempsey? Yes, Dempsey.
Mr. Bennett, give me that number again on the physical therapy part of this that you're gonna,
Okay, on the
provide.
on the physical therapy part, $150,000 to build a new building. We don't have physical therapy. And because we also have skill beds, part of being able to admit patients in the skill beds, they have to be able to get physical therapy.
Correct.
Yeah.
The staffing and the appropriate
We will-
facility.
We have a physical therapy office across the street from the hospital, and he's been covering us. But
Okay.
if you don't have a designated area for physical therapy, it's difficult to deliver the services at the bedside.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Vince,
Yes, sir.
I hate to use the word, but have we done any kind of needs as far as the size of the hospital? And part of it is, the question I have as well is the renovation costs that you've listed there for the building and the year that it was built and so forth and so on. I mean, we looked at the building across the world there as far as renovating it for parish government, and it was just as cheap to build a new building than it was to renovate with the lead paint and asbestos and everything else in there. Have y'all thought about doing that as opposed to renovating what you currently have, as outdated as what it is, have some kind of needs assessment and combine a lot of the stuff that you're talking about within one building, one structure, but it would be brand new, and you may save some money actually doing that as opposed to piecemealing and doing what you're talking about doing?
Well, since we started in 2010 by adding on that emergency room, we've kind of locked in to staying where we are in that building, and it's laid out pretty good. And I hear what you're saying about the cost, but we have to keep in mind that we have to keep operating. And you can't just tear the hospital down and start building a building, because we really don't have a lot of space where we could put a building at the current time where we are. Because we donated some land to parish government for the mental health building that's not being used anymore. We have a helipad on the property, and we need parking area.
Well, what I would recommend, in light of where you are with everything that's been discussed tonight, I understand it's not necessarily easy, but I'd encourage you to think outside the box and think of a way of potentially doing exactly what we're talking about, as far as you may be able to not necessarily reconfigure your emergency room, but where it's existing at is utilized, and not necessarily tear the whole hospital down and start over at that particular spot, but build something on the opposite side. And I don't know the layout of your property, but build something on the other side, and as you kind of build as you go, would basically redo the whole site with a newer building.
That's basically
Everything
what
you
we're
want.
doing. We're going out with that medical office building as a new building, and anything that we're losing by taking the structure that's down the center, the patient wing, there's services in that center. Anything that we're losing, we're putting it in that new medical office building. And we're utilizing instead of maintaining two hallways, we'll utilize the center as a hallway, and we'll be able to add a private shower and bath to each room. I think we have it well on its way. I mean, the plans are just about drawn for what we're doing, and it appears to be working out very well. We're pretty well advanced on what we're doing.
Mr.
Okay, thank you.
Cagnolotti?
At this time.
Terry.
1 second. I want to go back to a previous question. So what is I think we're going to have to go to an average monthly census, because I can't get into fractions to figure out an average daily census. So what is your average monthly census? in your hospital?
The monthly census in the hospital is less than 1. I can't give you an exact figure. But if I have these rooms renovated and I hire a full-time hospitalist, you can't do it with 10 rooms because that's not enough to justify a hospitalist. So
I would
we've thought
ask
all
you,
that.
sir, if I may interrupt.
I'm
why-
sorry?
What is the impetus for doing this at this stage? I mean, how many years has this hospital been in a situation? When was the last time you had a census of 10 in a month?
Before the Franciscan order bought our doctors out,
Okay. When was that, sir?
probably 15 years ago.
Okay. So for 15 years, you've been down somewhere around a census of 1.
No, ma'am, not that long.
Okay. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Because
How long?
I had a full-time hospitalist, but it wasn't working out good with the ER physician. So in 2014, we started utilizing the emergency room physician as the hospitalist because they were blaming each other. The hospitalist was saying they never called me. The ER physician said the hospitalist refused to take the patient. So I was caught in between that. You know, we have to do some trial and error too in what we do. Because what works on one side of the street doesn't work on the other all the time. I see where St. Francisville just recently did away with the program of the ER physician being the hospitalist, and they went up with full-time hospitalists as soon as they can get the new hospital open and get it licensed.
Okay, so your capital budget, I'm going to try to get my notes organized here, but it may be difficult. Your capital budget that doesn't exist also does not include, after we spend almost $16 million, any equipment or furnishings for these buildings that we're going to build.
Man, we never did that yet.
Okay. So
You don't need it.
let me go back. Do we have a needs assessment in Donaldsonville that has been done in the last 5 years?
No, ma'am, I don't have that.
Do we have a strategic plan for this
We have
hospital?
a strategic plan to meet the needs of the constituents on the west bank of the river.
But we have no needs assessment from which to base that.
We don't have a needs assessment, no, ma'am.
I'm going to stop here and say, I would caution you, sir, against spending $20 million of your constituents' money and ours without first doing a needs assessment, having that correspond to a strategic plan, presenting a capital budget, and determining a legitimate path forward for this money. I think what we have is a spending spree that's getting ready to go on that perhaps should have taken place 10 years ago. I would not have faulted it then. But we've let the roof leak for years and years and years. And we've let our census drop to less than 1 a month. So I'm just asking, I'm just encouraging caution that you get some things done, get your horse in front of your cart, and then come back with a capital budget that makes sense for your constituents. And I think we go back down here.
Okay, so I had kind of the summary of that, and if it's the wish of the committee, I'd like to request that Mr. Cataldo come back with a capital and operating budget for the next fiscal year for the approval of our commission. And to bring, I'd like to also see the current board with their current place of residence and a detailed cost plan. I'd like to have something besides a 5x6 piece of paper on how you're going to spend the $20 million. And then, maybe the needs assessment, but in my world, it's benefit versus cost. So I'd like to look at, what is the benefit for spending this 15? What are the benefits for spending these $15 million? And that might be the same as the needs assessment in the hospital. I'm not that familiar with it. So what I would like to see, that the committee requested come back next month and bring this to us.
If you'll put that in the form of a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I second that motion.
And I have a motion and a second. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that's what we need to do, Mr. Cataldo. Thank you very much.
I'll do my best. If I can't get it, I'll call y'all and ask for a delay.
I'm sure it will be granted.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll move on to item number 6, the Ascension Economic Development Corporation Quarterly Briefing. Ms. Kate? And Ms. Lisa's here too. Welcome.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of giving you our quarterly update tonight. We have had a lot of movement on our projects. Since our last quarter, we've been actively pursuing our A projects and high-level Bs and shifting those, trying to get some announcements finalized by the end of the year. So right now, we have 8 A projects, which are the closest to being finalized, and they represent over $2 billion of capital investment and almost 90 new jobs. And then we have overall 26 projects in the works with over $8 billion of investment, and they're all at different levels and different stages at this point. We continue to do our business retention program, which Lisa heads up for us, and we are on pace to hit our goal of 50. And our reasons for visiting is to find out what's going well with their operations here, to thank you for their continued business in our parish, to find out if there's any concerns that they may have in common with other businesses operating here that we could help assist them with overcoming, and then also to see if there's any plans for future expansions or additions to their facilities, or if there are any potential co-location opportunities that may arise, so that we'd be in a position to compete for those expansions versus other locations they may have in other parts of the country or the world. So we have a list that we've given you of the 29 companies that we have been to visit this point this year, and we've uncovered 3 potential expansion projects that are worth $90 million of capital investment and around 10 net new jobs. Additionally, with our program of work, we are continuing to pursue the development of the Riverplex Mega Park on the West Bank. We have submitted 2 additional projects this year. We have put together a marketing committee and are working on getting a website dedicated specifically to the site so we can up the presence of the site for consideration for mega projects. Additionally, we have just submitted sites for the Certified Sites program, and this is the new small program that has been enacted on the state level. And our first 3 sites are all going to be on the West Bank. So those ones are in the works now. We have, part of our program is to communicate with our elected officials and our partners, and we've been accountable for that, and we have met with our parish president 9 times this year. And we are here today for our regular quarterly report so that you know that we are busy working and can ask us questions about what we're working on. One of those things is ITEP, which is going to continue to be a big point that we're going to continue working on together. We had been working on a matrix system, and that has been delayed. Our AEDC board has voted to put it on hold indefinitely to figure out what we want to do. I've been tasked to go back and research our past industrial tax exemption awards to companies and see kind of what that impact has been officially, and then what it kind of would look like under the new program's guidelines. So what the difference would be, even just what has been granted previously. So I'm working on getting that report together so I can share it with all of you. And we do have 4 projects that have come to us to be considered for the industrial tax exemption program. So we have those to discuss with you tonight as well. But before we get to that, we have provided you with our 2016 financial review, which has been completed recently. There were no red flags. The findings were in line with all compliance for an audit, which we actually didn't have the audit, just the financial review. But we got a great rating. So if you have any questions on that, that is included for you. And then the last piece of business is we completed the Small Business Power Week, so thank you all for your support of that. We are looking at doing another event possibly next year or the year after, and kind of revamping it to be a little bit different than it was this year. And I'll open it up for questions that you may have for me or for Lisa.
All right. Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, I only got one. With the, make, I forgot the name of it, with Lee Malonzo, the make,
And Becca?
Mbecca, that's right. How is that working with, your organization?
Well, at the present time, we're not doing anything at the moment. So we've discussed with Lee as being a partner in basically people who contact AEDC that would qualify for an incubator rather than a brick and mortar location at this point in time. We would be able to send those folks over to Mbecca to either get the training or the office space that's necessary before they get to the next stage of business. So we're kind of waiting on Lee's direction as when he's ready to open and operate, and then we can send the parties over to him.
Okay. And my next question is, I know me and you had a brief conversation over there, and exactly small business, very small business, not small business as industrial small business. I'm talking mom and pop small business. What service do you offer or program that you offer for those people for economic development in Ascension Parish?
So for mom and pop type, we don't have a whole lot of programs. What we can offer them assistance on is helping them find grant programs or resources through other agencies that really actually focus on mom and pop and entrepreneurs. And LED has some really great programs for community development that speak to that, especially under the new governor who has given some more funding towards those types of programs. So we don't administer any of them from our office, but we provide a list of all those resources to anybody who contacts us that needs that.
Okay. Then my question is, for me is then, I would like to see your office get more involved with it. And if we have to redo the contract to be more specific with that, I would recommend that we do that, because once again, this office, economic development is really just for major industry. But we're missing out on a lot of moms and pops organizations looking for help in this community, and they really don't know where to go. They don't have a resource. So I hope we will look at that in the future, and you'll be, acceptable for that.
Good, because we're working on our program of work, so get that in there.
Mr. Dawson, any questions?
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I don't know if we did this in the past, Lisa, but, I see on the, report, I'd really like to see something maybe the next time, success to date. So can you, I don't know, caught you by surprise here, Kate, but, can we get something to say this is the industry we've brought in, to date this year that we could, we kind of.
This year.
Yeah.
Annual basis?
You can do it however you want, but we should have some, I'd like to see something here that talks about our achievement. And I'd like, maybe I'm jumping the gun, I might here on the next item. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the tax increase associated with the industrial tax exemption. About our, do you feel that's affected our competitiveness in the parish?
Well, realistically, the changes in ITEP have affected our competitiveness at the state level and the parish level. It's caused a lot of uncertainty amongst our existing industries. It's put a number of projects on hold. It's made it very difficult to compete prior to the competition. So we've had projects say that until they are assured that they would receive something, they have to factor it as a zero going in, which then makes us not look as competitive to others. We've also had one say they're not opposed to the process, but they wished it was a little bit clearer guidelines coming from the state as to how to apply it. And so the good thing in a way is that all the parishes are in this together because we all have to figure it out. But the bad thing is it creates an environment where we're competing now with each other, and nobody wants to be the one that is at the disadvantage. So we compete every day on geography, on infrastructure, on local tax rates, and then now we're adding another layer where we're competing on a state tax exemption that's supposed to be applied across the state, but now it's a local decision on the amount, the dollar figure. So it's been a challenge working with these A projects in particular on how to move forward with that. And so I think we've gotten to a comfort level where they feel okay with the process of walking through this system right now. But we would like to get to that point where we have an idea of what we want to do into the future, because this isn't going to change within the next few years. So we really have to get something together that makes this process simplified and gives some level of what expectations would be if you were a project that was looking to get an industrial tax exemption.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Satterly.
Yes, thank you for the report. Follow up to Councilman Joseph's comments about the small mom and pop potential businesses. In addition to that, do we have any, what I would call small R&D, research and development, sort of like, I guess, business incubator types that maybe they don't yet have any products launched and maybe not even making a lot of money or any money, but they represent significant potential because, let's say, they have a lot of intellectual property like patents and so forth. Do we have any programs in economic development to try to attract those kind of, and I realize they're high risk and so forth. I mean, the university did this a while back, but in many regards, while there have been certain failures, there have been some companies that have paid major dividends by doing that and accommodating those types of folks. I, for example, was a grantee that was able to secure significant funding, millions of dollars from outside of the state for doing that exact type of thing. So are we doing anything like that in Ascension Parish?
I don't have anything locally, but there's two programs at LSU that have been really successful, and unfortunately, when we've had
Probably
people,
what I'm talking about.
well, when they've approached us about, you know, a product that they wanted in an incubator, we've had to send them to LSU rather than having something for them locally. We've been approached by two companies that were both startups, and they would be more in the software and technology vein rather than strictly research and development. One of them actually is looking at opening a manufacturing location here, but their product is now being manufactured at the LSU incubator in the early stages. So
So it sounds like y'all have some competition from the university.
well, it's a good thing, because actually in that case, that project is starting out at the incubator, and then they're going to put their permanent location in Ascension. So that's the end game. But right now, we couldn't facilitate them having that same understanding, knowledge, and office space locally.
So you guys are at least talking to some of these folks at
yeah.
LSU and perhaps even at Southern University and elsewhere?
We are. So that's one of our partner networks, is working with them too.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert?
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you meeting with everyone, the past presidents. What about Mr. Kyle Rogers with Lamar Dixon? We fixing to open a new road out there, and quite a few things are going on, so whatever you could do to help us on that end, be greatly appreciated.
We would love to help get some more projects over around Lamar Dixon.
Appreciate it.
Anyone on this end? Mr. Gagliardi?
Just quickly, reverting back to the small business aspect and the help and participation, the Small Business Power Week, is that in conjunction with the chamber, or you do that?
One event is in conjunction with the chamber during that week. So they do their, what do they call the networking? Expo, the business expo. So we participate in that during Power Week.
And of course, any small business is invited to come get ideas from local accounting firms, banks,
Yeah.
insurance, realtors.
Open to everyone and
Okay.
free.
But you do work closely with the chamber, I know that.
We do.
Chamber of the partners
Yeah.
for Power Week.
Okay. Maybe just extend that a little bit more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman.
No problem. Anybody else? Let me make sure I'm There I am here. Okay. So if there are no other questions, thank you, Kate, for your report, and we'll move immediately into item number 7, which you all will also be addressing this body on the Ascension Economic Development to introduce industrial tax exemption applicants. Let's move forward on that.
So I have 4 applicants right now that want to start the process for receiving an industrial tax exemption. I cannot provide a tremendous amount of detail because they are all very confidential projects. So I'm going to walk through it, and if you have questions, I will answer them to the best of my ability. Project Magnolia, you can look at the chart to see if you want to look at more specifics, but it's a business that wants to build, own, and operate a new plant in Geismar to supply an existing business via pipeline.
Madam Chair, do we have something? No?
It's
You
still
should
just
have
on
it.
that.
Last page.
On this.
Oh, okay.
I don't see Magnolia.
If they're in the A's.
Fifth one down, Doug.
Oh, okay, beg your pardon, thank you.
So it's a $145 million investment to build and operate this new plant, and it's going to create 7 new permanent jobs after the construction phase. Project Desinia is the second project that's looking for an ITEP, and they're a first of a kind in the world demonstration plant with breakthrough technology that has many applications. This plant will most likely create future co-location opportunities that want to use this technology and be in close proximity. It's going to cost $25 million to build this plant and will create 2 new permanent jobs with average salaries of $100,000 a year. The third project is Project Bagel, and they're a major existing employer that's expanding their chemical capabilities. Their investment for this expansion would be $125 million and create 15 new jobs. And the last one is Project Sunflower, and it was Project Sunflower Seed, but the 2 projects were combined into one project. It's a co-location for a chemical producer, and it's critically important for positioning them to be more competitive now and for years to come. The consolidated investment is $32 million by the existing industry and $135 million from the co-located provider. It will result in 8 new permanent jobs with average salaries of $100,000 a year. And more importantly, it positions the current business to retain jobs by enabling them to be more effectively compete in the global market. So the total for all the projects is 32 new permanent positions with an investment of $462 million. They're looking for the exemption of 5 years at 100% and 3 years at 80% as outlined by the executive order. There will be clawback provisions, just like the last one. This one included locally and at the state level. And the Ascension Economic Development Board voted last week to recommend moving forward with the ITEP process for these 4 projects. Questions that?
Okay, we'll see. Questions? Mr. Dawson,
Well, I have a motion.
please.
So I move that we move forward these 5 projects, Bagel, Magnolia, Sunflower, Xenia, Sunflower. Who plants all the
Lisa's been busy. gardening.
sunflower seed? Move these forward with a recommendation. Am I correct that there's a recommendation from the board that these be awarded the maximum incentive under the industrial tax exemption? Is that correct? So to take the recommendation of the Ascension Economic Development Board and award these 5 projects the maximum allowable under the industrial tax exemption, which is 5 at 100 and 3 at 80.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second? And now we'll entertain questions. Mr. Johnson?
Madam Chair, I need to recuse myself from this item.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Kate. Right, item number 8. Resolution granting authorization for the administration to advertise for RFQ for architectural design for the East Bank Courthouse, subject to approval of the increase of civil filing fees as provided by Louisiana Revised Statute 13-996-69 by the Louisiana Judicial Commission, and to proceed to return to the council for authority to retain and design professional upon approval of the Louisiana Bond Commission. And I don't think is Bridget not here this
I
evening?
don't see Miss Bridget here, but what this is we need a motion to proceed to advertise for tech, but which we need in the motion to be reimbursed by the fees collected from the clerk of court's office. Correct, Bill? You want to add anything to that?
Well, I have a
Yes,
question
Mr.
about the
Johnson.
wording here, because
do
it,
too.
it appears to say to me that it's subject to the approval of the increase of the filing fee. So does that mean that we can't go out for this RFQ until till those fees have been approved?
No, I would like the motion to be paid by the filing fees. I don't know why they worded it like that.
So we need to revise this, it sounds like, to say, I think what we had talked about earlier was the award to be subject to the approval of the filing fees. You shaking your head, is that everybody agreement on that?
So we may have a
I'll ask-
language, it sounds like we have a language problem here. So would someone like to clarify what this is supposed to say from the administration, please?
Well, I think I can, it's subject to the award is subject. Not the advertise is subject, but the
Right.
award of the RFQ is subject to the approval.
Okay.
So just insert the words, the award, in front of subject.
O'Neill,
Is O'Neill
can
here?
you look at that?
Yeah, the idea
Oh,
is
there
that,
you go.
I thought the understanding was that we'd advertise, but we would not pick the architect until the judicial, it was approved, so that we wouldn't spend the money.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's why we need to say award in front of subject.
Yeah, correct, because we just,
For
we
RFQ
want
for
to,
architectural design for East Bank, award is subject to approval.
correct.
So I move that we adopt the amended resolution.
Okay. We will have a motion to adopt the amended wording. Any second? A second by Councilman Cagnolati. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 9, an engagement letter, 2017 audit, Tommy Lejeune, Balkan Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Chairman and Finance Committee, tonight, we have on the agenda, the engagement letter for your 2017 audit. Basically, the terms are the same as it was for the 2016 audit. We plan on timing and nature of the audit to be the same as it was in prior years.
Yeah, relative to that contract. So, basically, this is the time of year we ordinarily bring this to you, and then we start to initiate procedures in the fall with your staff. And number 10, number 10 sort of goes with that. We'll talk about it more in a moment, but it's something that's being mandated by the Louisiana Legislative Auditor in conjunction with the audit. So a new report that all auditors across the state will begin to issue. There was a 10-page document that was distributed or created by the legislative auditor to mandate certain processes. So that second part of the engagement letter with statewide agreed upon procedures will be a new set of processes that everyone, including you guys, will have to go through, and then we will issue a second report from the big report that we currently.
So I move that we move this forward to the council with
motion and a-
recommendation to approve.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Johnson?
No.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. Any objections?
So items 9 and 10, can we do them together?
Can we do those together, O'Neill?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion will cover both 9 and 10, and we have a second. Any objections? Hearing none, those motions pass. Okay. So while you're there.
Yeah. I think they're going to put a PowerPoint presentation up that I'm going to walk you
Excellent.
guys through.
Excellent.
And I've also put paper copies out in front of you. But basically, this is an expansion this whole discussion is the expansion of a comment that we made in our management letter. It was an operating efficiency and just expansion of a current process that you have that isn't necessarily mandated, but we thought it was good food for thought as we presented the audit back in, I guess, July or August. But basically, we had some conversations with Ms. Casso just to kind of expand upon what we had there and bring something to the Finance Committee to discuss a little further. So right now, it's somewhat conceptual at this point, and so that's kind of what you'll see as we go through the slides. But basically, kind of some history on this. The first time we introduced this concept to the parish was back in 1998. Basically, as we went through the audit process, we carried that in a similar management letter comment back at that time. And we carried it for about 5 years. Some actions that were taken, that your capital spending sort of expanded from where at that time they were doing a one-year budget, for roadways, that this is for like the next fiscal year, these were the plans. They expanded that into a practice of about 5 years where it was somewhat clerical in nature, but it was a 5-year layout of what spending might look like. Sort of our thoughts that it would have been more of a comprehensive exercise, that it basically would have included not only roads, but drainage, just all major capital needs of the parish, and then linking that with some of the operational obligations that you have. So, after about 3 to 5 years of the comment, no further action was taken, so we just simply let it go. I brought it back this year, and I kind of laid out just sort of what our thoughts were. Basically, if you think about 1998 compared to 2016, 2017, I mean, obviously the needs are more advanced today with the growth of people and just the growth of needs as a community. So I thought it was sort of a good time to bring it back. And I would just expect, and these are my personal views, that it's going to become harder over the course of time to align what resources you have with community needs. And so from that perspective, you'll never be able to do everything that the community demands, because you simply won't have all the resources to meet ongoing needs. So basically, it was just how to best prepare to meet as many needs as physically possible. Interesting, in my travels, as I've gone to some continuing ed and maintained just ongoing education, I've met some people from states where multi-year budgeting is a requirement by law. In the state of Oregon, they have a minimum 2-year budget. Like in Louisiana, we budget on a 1-year basis. There, it's a minimum of 2 years. So it's certainly an advanced concept. As I look at your budget, it's obviously satisfactory. It meets the needs, or it meets state budget law requirements, so it's nothing that is a compliance issue. You also take a step further, and you go through a process with the GFOA for their Distinguished Budget Award process, which is beyond what the state requires of you. So this, to me, would just represent another step forward to enhancing the planning process and the spending priority process. In terms of just what a multi-year budget does, if you look at the first sentence, it's simply to develop a forward-looking view of parish finances to align what available resources do you have that can meet community needs, and then spending on a prioritized basis to meet those particular needs. It certainly can improve a number of things. I sort of see 3 things in those 5 bullets. One is strategy. If you look at the first 2 bullets, it basically can improve strategy, planning, and basically prioritization of spending. Secondly, you look at the 3rd bullet point, linking operating obligations and what's left for capital obligations, because you're always going to have some level of spending to operate parish government. There's always going to be some obligation to have people to do ongoing maintenance and things of that nature, just the day-to-day operations. So it's what are our resources, how much obligations do we have to run government day-to-day, and then what's left to handle the infrastructure needs that are just very demanding on the parish. And in the last bullet point, the 3rd thing I see in this is just what's the evaluation process for execution of the plan. What's the ongoing monitoring and of this is what we planned, these are our goals, are we meeting them in a timely fashion? some of the benefits that are simply laid out, basically improving the long-range and strategic planning process, even down to the operational level, where you enable departments to take a long-term view of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and just what do they want to accomplish over the course of time. Basically looking at long-term priorities and how does that impact the current budget you do adopt on an annual basis that's required by law. I think it becomes more policy-oriented, which we'll go over in a moment. And then I think the last thing I'd point out is just looking at the programmatic performance, just on an ongoing basis, how are we performing, and what's the process for evaluating. I think the document would simply capture that. But as I read these bullet points, what I see is basically a comprehensive document that, one, defines a long-term set of goals and desired accomplishments. Second thing would be planning for how do you execute on those goals and accomplishments. I think the third thing would be to link what resources you do have to fund operations and the capital needs that are listed in your desired accomplishments, and then monitoring what's going on over the course of time. So if we laid out a 5-year plan, after some point in time, what's a milestone and a stopping point stopping time that we step back and say, where are we along this plan? Are we on target? Are we off target? What other adjustments we need to make? But I think it's just simply a guide for what do we want to accomplish over, a certain period of time, or chosen period of time that you might have. In terms of the process, just to dig a little bit deeper, that was more or less the conceptual part. I think sort of 5 points. One would be, defining some budgetary policies, and I've just listed a few. They're certainly not all inclusive. And some of this you have, if you look at the first one, with legal requirements, Louisiana law is going to govern what you must do from a budget standpoint. And you also have that defined in your charter, as well as you have an accounting manual that lists out the process for what you currently produce. So, you kind of have some of that already in place, but also defining, fund balance minimums, to the extent you've accumulated reserves, what is a minimum balance you want to maintain on an ongoing basis and for what reason. There could be multiple reasons for holding some reserves back, operationally, contingencies relative to disasters and catastrophes, could be planned capital outlay, but I think you could define that from a policy perspective, and to the extent you begin to accumulate dollars in excess of that is how do you utilize it, particularly if it's discretionary, where you may be able to have a range of choices in terms of how you might be able to utilize it, but I think you could dictate that through some sort of formal policy. You've sort of done that in the past with your 1 cent sales tax, where you've used amounts in excess of maybe a budgeted collection point. But I think this would get a little more comprehensive than that, to say that you may throw some of that in one direction, but also just how much are we going to accumulate to hold that we think is comfortable, and then make a decision on how you'd utilize it. Once you get past a point where it's subject to utilization. The third point, debt management. Here it's more or less, for me, you define it in policy as to the extent you do take on capital projects and you begin to find resources to fund them. Debt is one way to fund large infrastructure projects, and then your policy could dictate the amount that you want issued for the collection of projects you have, and what's the timeline associated for its utilization. The other thing you might consider is whether there's an internal borrowing opportunity. If you have a fund that's got some discretionary usage and it's got a large accumulation of money, maybe you use that on some basis with a payback plan. I think that's all subject to policy and your personal choices. Once you get past just budgetary policy, is defining a long-term set of goals and priorities, and just listed a couple. Maybe it's transportation related, that you want to accomplish this over the next 2 years, or the expansion of drainage projects, that there may be some areas that you want to basically go after from a drainage perspective, or a creation of a sewer utility. I know we've talked about that for a number of years, but those are some very broad, but I think you'd start with some very broad goals and then simply penetrate into the third point, which would be some multi-year projects what are they? List them out. I know you're going through some master planning from both a drainage and roadway standpoint, but, taking that list of information and simply dropping it into here, these are some projects that we can accomplish over the chosen period that we use this document to define. And then from there, creating a spending plan, so that you know how much over that same chosen period of time we're going to spend on whatever selected projects we've embraced, and then marrying that up to what are our operating obligations, and then you compare that to what's basically available resources. Does it work? If you develop a master plan and a set of goals and objectives over a short, for a long period of time, do you have the resources to basically be successful? And I think you could use this document to sort of walk you through the process. But I would look at it like, basically you got operation and maintenance needs. If you want to monetize it, you've got, if you looked at your numbers, last year you had about $100 million in revenue. We had about, minus the flood, we had about $50 million in operating costs. So we know we have about $50 million left that you could designate in some fashion, or basically, and I'm getting a very high level, there's a lot of legal obligations associated with that money, so it's not free to spend. But basically, you'd step through the process as to, how do you start to basically utilize or to execute some of the project spending you want to go through. The last slide, I just sort of threw out some parish considerations, from a budgetary standpoint. I think, we sort of talked about a little bit this a moment ago, but just what are some fund balance minimums? We've kind of shared some data, with Gwen's office in terms of just how to step through that, and maybe you define that in the budget document, that an expectation of not only of getting a spending plan is if we've got reserves, what's a good reason for holding on to those? And I know Mr. Dawson had asked the question of us at the last, when we presented the audit, and basically it's a very subjective process, but you can simply go through and say if we've got X amount of dollars sitting in our account from a reserve perspective, is, all right, we need this money for these particular reasons. And so to the extent there's excess, you can decide how you'd want to utilize them. Debt management, I mentioned earlier, and then simply maybe from a policy standpoint is just what's the oversight of the plan once it's developed and embraced. I'd probably come in and define some activities to include in the analysis. I wouldn't necessarily recommend extending it to everything you do. I'd probably look at more of the discretionary resources that you have that you can control. I mean, there's certain things like the health unit, fire protection, smaller funds that have money that has a legal designation that you can't use for anything other than where they're falling out. So, I would probably concentrate on transportation, drainage, and utilities, which is more than anybody can handle. So I think from that perspective, that would be enough to sort of kick this off. I'd probably from there develop a spending plan along those three categories. Probably look at operational spending, like I mentioned earlier. If you have $50 million in operational obligations, what's the remaining core resources that are left? And then from there, just that's what we think is available for capital spending. And you start to say, how do we utilize that for the long-term plan? And then basically, just estimating your resources. The few things I'd concentrate on, I mean, property and sales tax is 80 to 85% of your revenue. That's the numbers you really got to get right as part of a long-range plan. So I'd spend some effort there. In terms of capital, where along the way, if it's a 5-year plan, where do you intend on issuing debt to create resources for some of the projects? And then if you're in the utility business, what user fees or impact fees, things of that nature, are you generating that can contribute to the plan as well? But I think the big thing is looking for a sense of focus, rather than trying to take that big budget document that you have now that's, pretty heavy, and trying to extend that out 5 years. I don't think that's the approach I would take. I'd just simply make it more of a document to sort of follow these guidelines. Be small, much smaller than that, something that you'd be able to utilize, to have a governed set of policies, basically what activities you really want to concentrate on, and those three would be more than anyone can handle. And basically estimating what are the resources available to run the parish, along with addressing those particular community needs. But overall, it's very conceptual in nature. I think it'll require a lot of thought and planning and creativity. You know, it's certainly going to require a lot of effort to execute it as well. It all sounds easy, but I think conceptually it's a lot, but I think it would take a lot of effort to sort of move it into something that you guys could embrace.
Tommy, that was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've got something too. There's a 4-page document behind that, gets into a little bit more detail. I just left that for your own reading. I wasn't going to go through it, but it just expands a little bit more on what I have here.
Thank you. I know that, I'm sure that everyone will have a question or two. Let me start at either end. And Benny, it's your first time in the barrel.
I don't have anything right now, thank you. I'm soaking this in.
Okay, Mr. Cagnolati? Same here. On the other end?
Well, Tommy, once again, I mean, it all goes down to the same thing I guess I've been saying. Policy and procedures. And here we go right here, which you coming back again and saying that we need to update, innovate some more policy and procedure to get us a better government for us. I guess in a way we're looking at going out for a consultant, evaluate us. I mean, I know you give us an overview and your point of view, but for these policy and procedures, I mean, like the chairman said, there's a lot of stuff. So, I mean, for us to come up to speed with it, we got to have somebody at least experienced with this here to at least coach us along and saying that we're going in the right direction, take our ideas and implement them and give us a direction to go with them.
Right.
So you would recommend that we would go out for some type of outside?
I think you could look at a few things. I mean, you know, one is you do have some master planning activities going on right now. I think I'd consult with those groups to expand upon maybe some of the services they're currently providing to you, to maybe monetize some of the thoughts. So they come up with a master plan for roads. What does that mean monetarily? Same for drainage, same for sewer, and use that as a basis to start creating a document. You know, I think that's one approach. I think the other is you could search out and find a consultant to help you walk through the process if that's what you just, you know, if you wanted to move forward with something like this. Third option might be a combination of some of the internal staff helping along with somebody coaching them along. But you know, you probably should have a consultant involved in under that option. But I think this is, again, is very advanced, and it'd be a step in a direction that I don't know anyone in Louisiana that's sort of embracing doing this. So it'd be somewhat very unique for this part of the world.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dawson?
Tommy, I don't have any questions. I just want to lend my support to this. I think a 3 or 5 year, I don't know, I didn't see the numbers on that, a 3 or 5 year company plan is something fairly commonly used in business, and I think that it's important for us to be able to look out 3 to 5 years and try to forecast our revenues and our expenditures. That's prudent.
Mr. Sadler?
Hey, Tommy, and I guess what Bill said, you know, as a former university professor and dabbling a little bit in the grants arena, we always have to go out 2, 3, maybe 5 years on large grants and stuff, and it kind of helps you to know where you're going ahead of time to have such planning. I don't know the number either. I realize you said the state says 1 year, and we do a little bit more than that. Should we do a little bit even more than that? Probably so. Wouldn't want to see it go too far, maybe 2 to 3 years, somewhere in that range. But I'm going to say on the record, I'm a fan of multi-year budgeting and multi-year strategic planning of a lot of things, including, as you said, we can borrow from our work that we're about to do on master planning for roads, for drainage. Not quite sure we're there yet for sewer, but why not the triple threat?
Right. And I think you got some work that you're having done that you may be able to utilize. And I think it's just simply monetizing the thoughts that you captured with that effort.
Mr. Lambert?
Hey, appreciate everything, Tommy, and I guess we good, but we can hit into great, so,
That's the difference.
yeah, it's, I guess we're on the same wavelength here, that transportation, drainage, and utilities, we're gonna have to bring these three things under, together, so, appreciate you bringing that out. Appreciate the hard work, thank you.
Tommy, I want to get a little bit of clarity. We have an amazing finance department. They have relevant to compliance. They are award-winning. I have not seen the opportunity for them to drive this kind of discussion. Where, in your view, do organizations who are having this kind of discussion see that policy originate?
I think here, I think it would probably start in the finance area, and there would be some dialogue. I think it would be with the administrative team, certainly some dialogue with the council. So I think, generally speaking, it sort of originates, I could see it originating out of finance, and to some extent, as you have department heads that are connected to these particular, areas of service. So it'd be, program-related individuals.
So what you're saying is that you envision that at some point in this process, finance is driving the discussion of budget, as opposed to department heads saying, this is what I need, and running to finance.
Right, and it could
saying,
be,
do we have this money?
right, and there could be a sense of dialogue, in terms of how that looks.
Okay. So I'm trying to just simplify this in my mind, and hopefully for our viewers. And then to ask you, is an overall strategic plan for our government going to be essential, in your opinion, to further this cause? Wouldn't we have to sit down as a group, develop a strategic plan, approve that plan, and then monetize that?
It could, and that's what I was suggesting earlier with some of the master planning that you've engaged some people to help prepare on behalf of the parish. That could drive where some of this falls out.
Okay.
That there are going to be a lot of thoughts and, to me, useful information out of that process. There should be some useful information that you could then use to say this is what this plan looks like over the next however many years that's defined, or what chosen period we want to look at. So from my standpoint, I think that would be a great start to look at it. In terms of policy, I think that may not necessarily need the master planning, since that's more strategic. That's something that could be just developed internally along with some consulting help. But I think probably starting with the strategy and staying with those three items makes sense now. An overall strategic plan, yeah, that probably makes sense, but I'd probably start with with a smaller set of facts to deal with, rather than saying let's put our arms around this whole thing. Because eventually you may be able to get there, but I'd probably start. What are your top three priorities? And right. I would expect, as someone who's lived here, roadways, drainage, and utilities, since that's going to be a big ticket item.
Right. Okay. So our finance department is getting ready to have to deal with the ERP. That's a big lift. That's a heavy lift. And so would you recommend that we look at this a year from now, once ERP is in place? Or would we try to, do a dual track here? Would that put too much stress on that staff?
I think it would probably
I'm sure
be tough.
I would expect Ms. Gwynn and everybody else over there to be doing like this.
I would not expect them.
They're not doing it.
I wouldn't expect this to be done in the next 3 months.
Oh, absolutely
I
not.
think, they'll have a lot on their plate for the next 9. But I think it is something that, you sort of get started with something and start working towards, you know, how do you sort of create a comprehensive document? And I'd probably start with, I don't know when the master plan, you know, those activities are going to kind of come to some draft or, you know, realistic conclusion that you could start using that information. And I think from there it can involve, you know, who's involved with, you know, planning out the parish's roadway systems, whether that's maintenance and construction, you know, drainage, you know, what I mean, they're gonna possess a wealth of program-related knowledge about what needs to happen that I would expect would be in those master plans. And I think from that point is, all right, let's take that knowledge and monetize it. And how does that look over the next 3 to 5 years? You know, I don't know. And starting with that, and then building a document around that effort, so you're not reinventing the wheel.
Fantastic. Any other questions, gentlemen? Please do not stop putting that in there, because we are committed to accomplishing it. And it may just mean that we delay until we can get our electronic program up and running. And then we don't even let them take a breath, and we start on something else.
Right, and I wouldn't get discouraged. You know, if you don't have it by the end of the year, I wouldn't get discouraged.
Okay. Tommy, thank you so much. I appreciate this very much. Educational for all of us. Thank you. Now I've got to find my... All right, number 12, the status and discussion of the audit findings. Ms. Gwynn.
Good evening. You have before you a copy of our findings from our 2016 audit. Every time there's a finding that's listed, there's a response from management for corrective action. And as I understand it tonight, you would like a status on exactly how they are coming along with the implementation. I've contacted all the departments that are involved in this, and they're here tonight to give you their status of where they are with it, with the recommendation of our corrective action. Finding number 1 was a federal award from HUD. That's our Section 8 program. As you recall, that's the utility and rent subsidy program. In my office, Dawn handles that program, so I'll let her make a comment on exactly where we are with continuing to implement this finding.
Do we have some more paper copies? You left them out on this end of it.
Do we have some more?
It's in Novus.
It's in
It's in
I've
Novus.
got it in Novus.
Yeah, but sometime,
OJ's dead over here.
yeah. No, I charge.
Can y'all share down there, gentlemen?
I have it.
Okay, you got it?
I need to share.
All right, thank you. Okay, Ms. Gwynn.
Okay, I'm going to respond to the first one. This is a relatively new requirement by HUD, and what we're currently doing is working with the third-party grant administrator, the auditors, and HUD to bring this up to date. It's a very cumbersome process, but we are, however, working diligently to resolve the issue. It's just going to take some time because of the way the computer program works and how the stages we have to go through to get even a year passed by HUD.
Okay, and the second finding, and after we're finished with all of them, you will be open to questions. And also, I think Tommy Lejeune would like to make a few comments at the end. So the second finding was the public bid law. This was an issue of a road that was transferred from one project to another, and our attorney, O'Neill Parrington, would like to comment on the status of where we are with that.
Yes, this was the Bayou Terrace Road project. We moved from the 2013 to the 2015 road project, and in doing so, we saved $370,000. We don't think there was a violation of the open meeting law from the legal standpoint, but what we've done is in the 2013 road project, there were listed 40 roads and 112 alternates. In 2015, the engineer that was with the parish then didn't list any alternates. So our recommendation is, and which will be followed, that we're going to list every road in our road package, whether it's going to be part of the project or not, or anything that might be worked on, so there'll be no need for doing anything like that. But we saved $372,000 by utilizing another publicly bid project.
Okay, thank you, O'Neill. Finding number 3 had to, involved our travel policies, and our new HR Director, Talita Wesley, is here to address that one. Or, well, HR developed the travel policy. Okay, well, kind of a misunderstanding here.
That's
I thought
okay.
we went over it this afternoon. Our management's response was, management agrees with the above recommendation and will implement procedures to ensure that no charges are made on the parish credit cards that are not related to parish business. So I think everybody's aware of that. It was a long-standing issue that we incurred every year, that if you traveled and your spouse went with you, you could charge it on the parish credit card, but we would deduct it from your expenses. Well, that's considered, illegal use of public money, I guess, because of the duration. So we've corrected that already, and that won't happen again. Issue number 004, non-compliance with personnel policies and procedures. This is our personnel policy, and that is developed by our HR department, and Ms. Talita Wesley will address that one.
Well, the audit found several required documents were absent from personnel and confidential files. So we've created a document control process for new hires and employee status changes. In addition, a monthly random audit will be conducted for new hires that were hired for the previous month. And that's for that particular one. We also had in the audit, it revealed regarding our parish pay scale that there were some rates in excess of the parish-defined minimum and maximum pay scale. It also noted that our cost of living adjustments weren't in alignment with that is recommended by the American Institute for Economic Research. And so, as you know, the parish consulted with SSA and accepted their recommendations for adjusting the minimum and maximum pay scale based upon current market data. And so adjustments were made to 38 employees who were below the minimum rate, and then 64 of the employees who were above the market rate were, their pay rates were frozen until those particular rates were within the market range. As to COLA awards will now be applied to the actual salary range rather than the individual employee, which will create some opportunities for those 64 employees who were impacted by the above average market rate. The COLA index that we will use will be upon recommendation from the finance department, and we'll move from that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. And the last one, number 5, was internal controls at Lamar-Dixon Expo Center involving how they were negotiating fees. And once again, Mr. O'Neill will discuss that.
Yeah, so the next meeting, we'll introduce an ordinance. What we're going to do is set the rents at a hard rate and have only certain ways which they believe will be reduced, but the soft cost will not be as rigid as they were in the ordinance. That way, like I remember in one of the contracts we negotiated with the Sportsman Show, they didn't pay the parking, but they increased the cost of the fees by $1 to cover for that. So we're going to fix that so they won't have that discrepancy in the ordinance and how and how Lamar Dixon does business.
And that concludes the 5, but Mr. Lejeune would like to make a few comments.
I was just going to simply say that as part of our process with the audit, we come in and do some sort of interim procedures before the close of your fiscal year. And this is one of the areas we look at, past findings, what corrective action has been taken, so that we can report on it when we issue the audit next year. So we'll be looking at doing that probably sometime between late November and early December is usually the time that we come out. And then we later come back and finalize our procedures in the spring.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer.
Any questions, gentlemen? Mr. Dawson?
Just one question. It looks to me like none of these will be repeated for 2017, so we had 26, this is for 2016, we're 8 months into 2017, so is that correct, that we shouldn't be repeating any of these for the next audit?
No, I think we resolved, but possibly the first one, HUD, because it's such a complicated system. We working with our third-party administrator who has to put in some documentation, and then we have to upload some documentation, and then our accountant has to approve it. Our auditor has to approve it, and then it goes to HUD, and they have to approve it, and you know how the federal government works, they don't.
I got dizzy and all that.
Yeah, they don't get in any hurry to approve it, and the deal is you can't upload the next year until the whole process is completed on the year you're in, so that's why it's taking us so long. We hope to contact HUD and see if we can, any way we can catch up. We're ready. We have all our information, but they won't let us upload the 1 year until they approve the year before.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Ms. Gwen, that won't affect our HUD program
No,
for the upcoming, so that documentation,
we're working towards it. It was regulation that just got, we weren't aware of, and then when, in fact, Jacob Wagaspack, one of our auditors, worked with our third-party administrator to try to get it all set up, and
okay, as long as it don't affect the upcoming
Yeah.
application, that if an opening come, because that's, we only limited to so many of them right now.
yeah, we're ready. We
Okay.
have all our documentation. It's just we can't load it till HUD approves one by
Thanks.
one.
Thank you, Ms.
Yes,
Young.
Mr. Sadler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question, Glenn. Under cause on the HUD issue, under findings, the parish did not submit its 2013, 14, or 15 audited financial information to HUD within a 9-month period of its fiscal year end. Is that pointing a finger more at our third party, or?
Well, it was just trying to work, probably Jacob could respond to that, because he's been working with him and then us to try to.
Since it's dated, it ain't a new finding that HUD obviously wanted us to do this 3-4 years ago.
That's correct. That's correct. It was required in the compliance supplement for the HUD program. It was just never done, and we caught on to that, and it's been a repeat finding for some time. As Ms. Gwen said, it's really a cumbersome process that you have to go through. Your staff has to input data. They then submit that. I then go in and issue an audit report and verify that same data. That gets submitted to HUD. The last year we submitted, I think HUD took 3 or 4 months to get back with us. They had a number of questions that they had. We had to clear that up. A lot of back and forth going on, and we're just continuing to push through year by year.
So it looks like we actually already fixed it, because I don't see 2016 in here, so it means.
Well, you had 9 months, and 9 months was not.
Oh, it's
at
not
that
quite
point
there
in
yet.
time. That's
Yeah, we're
correct.
close. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
It is in process. We have a process in place to continue to push through. It's just really, it's cumbersome and time consuming.
Well, I'm sure if it deals with the federal government.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Lambert? Mr. Lambert?
Good.
Mr. Cagnolati? Mr. Johnson? Okay. All right. Thank you for that report, Ms. Gwen, very much, and Jacob and Tommy for your assistance on that as well, and all the other members of the staff who had input. We appreciate it. Item number 13, amendment to the professional services contract with Damian Johnson. Does anybody have any?
Well, let me address this, because
Okay.
I talked to Ms. Hamilton today. They changed the time, but we're not gonna change the amount paid, but we're going to change the duties and, for the contract, because the IRS said that, took this to be a security guard contract, but Ms. Hamilton provided me the information that what Mr. Johnson does is not a security guard, he's a therapeutic safety technician. So we just need to amend it to say that. He does more than, he maintains safety, but he also conducts urine drug screens, interacts with the mental health patients, de-escalates any conflicts, and has to be available for privacy policy and state HIPAA licensing. So we're not going to change the amount paid, we're just going to change his conditions also.
Motion to approve the amendment to the contract for professional services.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 14, renewal of a contract with Tetra Tech Incorporated for disaster-related debris monitoring and related services. Good evening, Rick.
Hey, good to see you. Madam Chairman, I'd like to request to renew the monitoring contract for debris for one more year.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 15, a renewal of a contract with Ralph's Market, second year of the request for proposals. Rick?
I'd like to request to renew this contract.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Cagnolati, a second by Mr. Lambert, Mr. Todd Lambert. Any questions?
How many vendors you had on this?
I had one vendor, Ralph's Market. Is that the one you're making reference to for the
Yeah,
emergency
did
fitting?
you have any other?
We didn't bid it out. This is just a renewal. We bid it 2 years ago. I think we had two vendors when we actually bid it out several years ago.
Thank you.
Right. So I think we were at no objections. That motion passes. Item number 16, a renewal of professional services contract with DRC Emergency Services LLC for disaster-related debris removal.
This is our debris removal contractor that's been with us since 2010. I'd like to request renewal of that contract.
Motion by Councilman Todd Lambert, second by Councilman John Cagliotti. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. 17, a renewal of a contract with Tetra Tech for grants management and administration and associated project management activities.
This is one contract where we can actually write task orders based on emergency management services throughout the parish. We don't have any active right now, but I'd like to.
So moved.
So moved.
Have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson, a second by Councilman Satterly. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Number 18, flood update. Update on projects and FEMA reimbursement. Rick Weber.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, we have a memorandum that I put up there right before the meeting. I'm going to update you on the temporary categories of work, and then I'll bring Eric DeRoche up. He'll update you on all the permanent categories of work. Again, in August 10th, we had a meeting with the federal coordinating officer, and since that meeting, we've got much more traction on some of our projects that's been coming back in from FEMA. And I'll brief you on categories A and B, which is debris removal and emergency protective measures. The one table that you see on the first page is no change from the last time that I briefed you on what's happening with debris removal. What has changed is on the second page, that one project worksheet that I signed for emergency protective measures actually came in at $4.5 million. And if you combine the two temporary categories of work together, debris removal and emergency protective measures, you can look at it graphically on page 2. On the y-axis is going to be debris removal and protective measures, and the blue line is the flat line for our expenses that the parish has incurred for the flood. The difference is $11.3 million is what we're projecting to receive for reimbursements for temporary categories of work, and then the $9.4 million is what we've expended. So we actually plus about $1.9 million. That surplus is the actual reimbursement that we received for operating our equipment, including the pump stations, which is fairly expensive to operate. So this does include the 10% match. So the 10% match was pulled out of this. So this is a $1.9 million windfall, but you have to extract the fuel costs that were involved in that. So this is looking good. Again, Since it's a project worksheet that's above $1 million, it still has to go to the FEMA headquarters queue in Washington DC for approval. So it may be some slight adjustments, but I feel good about these two projects. Any questions on temporary categories before I bring Eric up? Eric?
Thank you. Good work.
Thank you very much, Rick. Good evening, Aaron.
Good evening. On permanent categories, we have Category C, which is the roads. We've got word back where our testing of the roads for a scientific method with FWD, which we were anticipating about a $5.4 million project, was denied or disallowed by FEMA. We were going at it as basis what Brazos County in Texas done. Since then, Brazos County's award has been pulled by FEMA along with ours and has been deobligated. So the $5.4 million that we were anticipating with that, we will not receive. We got a $0 PW. We did have a roughly $55,000 in engineering costs, which we anticipated, and we were projecting that we knew going out that we had this possible expenditure as if FEMA didn't approve it, which they didn't. Now, our traditional project worksheets where we broke up into 3 different ones for the visual, the old-time method that FEMA has used in many, many years. We still have not received word on yet. They're still reviewing it, and that's approximately $419,000. So that method is still in play, and we are still waiting to hear word from FEMA on the roads. On Category E, we've had some progress where we had some project worksheets written and identified and awarded. First of all, the fire stations 50, 60, and 62, those project worksheets, we will only have direct administrative costs due to the fire department's insurance being, making the fire departments whole. So FEMA's not going to pay you for that expense. We will get our direct administrative costs associated with those project worksheets for administrating the projects and such awarded. On Station 61, we have officially notified the state requesting what FEMA identifies as the 50% rule. Here locally, you'll know it as substantially damaged based off the floodplain ordinance. They're very, very similar. It's just a different policy and procedures where we have to submit documentation from architects and engineers to substantiate the damage, the repair cost estimate versus the construction of a new cost. So that's moving forward with Fire Station 61, along with Sanamar Park and PJ's Landing. With mosquito control, we are 100% complete repaired. That project bid came in at $124,200. FEMA's actually wrote a PW and given us an award for $117,000. $16,000 was disallowed due to termite damage in the building that we had to repair. Also, some reuse items FEMA classifies as reuse, like toilets, urinals, lavatories, that type of things. When they went and gutted the buildings, they threw all that out, so we had to purchase new. FEMA says that was reusable because it's porcelain, it can be cleaned. So things like that, they were disallowed, and so FEMA took it out. So we lost about $16,000 in disallowed cost by FEMA's eyes, but we did get $117,000. The River Region Cancer Center, this week we did receive the preliminary drawings for the parish to make comment on. Once we make all our comments and reviews, then they will produce the documents, and we'll be coming back to y'all to get authorization to go out for bid for the repair of the River Region Cancer Center. And we also did get an award for $199,000, I'm sorry, for our vehicles and equipment that were parish owned. Once we have the vehicles been sold at auction for salvage, FEMA will deduct the salvage value that we receive for that auction from that project worksheet, but we will be made whole when you take the two together. FEMA has come back and denied our claim for leased vehicles, and that is due to the fact that in the lease documents it says that we are to provide insurance, and FEMA and the state does not recognize Ascension Parish as self-insured, so we cannot make a claim for leased vehicles because in the lease, like I said, states that we are to carry insurance on it. And then on the last Category G, which is Sanamar Park, we did receive a project worksheet for the electrical switchgear for the ball field lighting for $61,000. FEMA did conduct a site visit last week where we went out and did inspections of walking track, fencing, and walkways that were damaged that we claimed, and we're waiting on a project worksheet to be issued for that. So that's where we stand on permanent work. Here to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Any questions, gentlemen? Mr. Satterly?
I don't know if it's appropriate to you or to Rick. And Madam Secretary, if we ask questions about Category E on buildings?
Yes, sir.
I received a text message this afternoon from a colleague, and I quote, "I have been informed that CARA failed to apply for approximately $80,000 of FEMA reimbursement." I noticed that PJ's Landing, which of course houses animal control, is listed in the in your handout. So my question is it true what the councilman sent to me? Has CARA failed to do anything with our asset, the parish's building in Sorrento on Highway 61, and/or any types of reimbursement that the parish may be entitled to for CARA activities at Lamar Dixon during the Great Flood?
I just want to make sure that we speak in apples and apples, Councilman Satterly.
Okay.
Well, I sat down with Kara's house at Lamar Dixon during the incident and explained in detail the documentation that they needed to do to apply for public assistance for a nonprofit organization, and they started to do that. However, between that time, the lady that was doing it resigned, and I think they lost the documentation when they went to do their RPA, which is a request for public assistance. Without that document in place, beyond that deadline, there's nothing FEMA can do. So they tried to get an extension, FEMA denied it. So what you're looking at is that the public assistance that they can get for all the efforts that they did at Lamar Dixon, they won't get reimbursed for because they didn't meet that first deadline to submit a request for public assistance. Now, the repairs to the building, that was taken care of by parish government. It was one of the first ones that was repaired. But the RPA public assistance data for nonprofits, that's not going to happen for CARES House.
Okay, so are you, sir, faulting CARA for this in any way?
No, maybe it was an oversight. Maybe the lady resigned and nobody realized that she had oversight of putting this in place. I'm not sure. But the private nonprofit has to apply. The parish government cannot apply for them.
Okay.
So they have to do that.
So I called CARA, to be honest, and saying from Ms. Culpepper is that they applied but were turned down, but that would be maybe referring to the money sought for the Lamar Dixon activities.
That's not accurate. I spoke with Tara Walker, who's our SAL, a state applicant liaison. They missed the deadline for an RPA. You missed the deadline for the RPA. There's
Right, but I've been consistently asking Mr. Weber at these meetings about CARA, and I've been given every assurance that they're doing okay with that. It is a parish asset, and I would be concerned that we would certainly want to protect it. So I'm wondering, do both parties? I don't like the word fault, but I mean, you know, we want to fix the Sorrento facility, period.
I mean, there's resources that's the infrastructure that was taken care of. That was taken care of by parish government. We took care of that.
Right.
The administrative piece for public assistance, which has nothing to do with the infrastructure.
Right.
Okay, the infrastructure was taken care of. Their responsibility to do the RPA fell by the wayside. So,
Right.
and that's not a parish responsibility. That's the private nonprofit's responsibility to do that.
But that's Lamar Dixon, though. It's apples, like you said. That's not the actual
Right,
asset.
that's Lamar
The
Dixon.
building that the parish owns, that CARA utilizes to perform their services in
Yes.
our cooperative endeavor agreement in Sorrento.
Yes.
We just fixed it on the parish, but we didn't get any money from FEMA for that.
No, we didn't.
And that's no more their problem than ours.
No, they couldn't apply for that funding because they don't own the building. We do.
We did.
Yes.
And we did apply for it.
We did not apply.
We did
There were
not.
some issues when we did the procurement to get it repaired. They wanted it done fairly quickly, so we didn't apply. So if there's issues with some of the source documentation, we're not going to apply.
Okay. Thank you for the explanation.
Any other questions? Mr. Dawson?
So that brings up, I mean, what's the value of this, of the grant that wasn't applied for? Do we have any idea?
I can get that data to you, but I believe it was around $70,000, $80,000, maybe a little bit more, but I'll get the data to you
Okay.
to confirm it. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay,
right now.
thanks.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Follow-up
Sauer.
question. It's a loss, but it's more in time of what they did at Lamar Dixon. So they lost their ability to recoup that time, as opposed to it like being, you know, apples and oranges again, the structure in Sorrento.
Right. I mean, what needed to transpire was that to document all the volunteer hours, because they had volunteers, thousands of volunteers. that
Right,
came.
so they wound up taking care of a whole bunch of animals.
Yes.
But the federal money could have reimbursed for that. But it's their loss in terms of their volunteered efforts.
Yeah, and all the donations that came in from around the country, dog food, pet supplies, all of that could have been applied towards a match or something. So we it's probably fairly substantial, because what the activity that was at Lamar Dixon was a fairly large amount of work that was done. So they could have gotten at least some money back had they applied.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rick, one quick thing, I don't know, maybe administration might, lease vehicles, how many lease vehicles did we have, or a dollar amount that were destroyed? That we not getting any recovery back from, that
I'm
come out
thinking
of?
if 10 to 12 is popping to my head,
10 to
but I
12.
don't remember the exact number. We'll have to get back to you.
Okay, appreciate that.
Most of the equipment that
We had equipment in there.
Yeah,
That's what
I
was
want to
saying.
include,
Yeah, including
if
equipment.
you can
10
get
to
that
12.
number from just any time, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That would be a good number for all of us to have in your next report, please.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. They're a very thorough report. 19, an intergovernmental agreement between Ascension Parish Government, Ascension Fire Protection District Number 1, and the Ascension Parish Sheriff's Office. Ascension Parish Government's total contribution is $54,000.
Move to approve.
I have a motion by, I didn't catch where that came from Councilman Dawson, second by Councilman Dempsey Lambert. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 20, approval of a contract amendment with Mujo Architecture for design of the Santa Maria Volunteer Fire Department Station 60, Stringer Bridge Road,
So moved.
Gene Tech.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Todd Lambert, a second by Councilman Cagnolati. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 21, amendment to contract with Fresh Architecture Consulting. Ms. Martha, I think you want to elaborate on this one for
Yes, ma'am.
everyone's
There
understanding.
was information left off the amendment. It's not $75,000. We're extending this contract for 4 months through December, and there is in the budget $20,000 for that time for the extension. It equals up to total of $75,000 when we added the 20 in there, but it's within the budget.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Councilman Joseph, a second by Councilman Dawson. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Chairman.
Thank you. Item number 22, an amendment number 1 to contract between BFI Waste Services, doing business as Republic Services, and the parish to increase the not-to-exceed amount of the contract to $130,000. Kyle?
Afternoon.
Good evening.
This is a pass-through expense that is nothing more than increased business at Lamar Dixon. This is trash removal. The more events we have, the more trash we're going to generate, the more dumpster pulls we're going to have.
Motion by Councilman Dempsey Lambert, second by Councilman John Cagnolati. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The monthly contract report, Ms. Sandra.
Good evening. You have before you the list of all contracts that's been entered into in the month of August.
Does anyone have any questions, gentlemen?
So move.
Then there are no questions. We thank you very much. Item number 24, the sales and use tax report. Ms. Quinn.
You have before you your normal monthly sales tax report. This represents collections for the month of July. That's based on June sales. And you can see our 3 sales tax districts, or the drainage tax and the sales tax also. There, you can see the drainage on the drainage sales tax on the east side is still in a positive year-to-date. And the 2 sales tax districts are in a negative 3% and 314. That's where you're still going to see that we're comparing that to that extremely large construction project on the west side of the river. But if you look at the budget comparison on your right, the last column, we're at 58.33% of the year. And compared to our budget, all three are above that number. So we still anticipate operating and collecting according to the budget or more. On the second page is the bar chart. And you can see where all our sectors are above last year's collections except for the petrochemical industry. And then on the third page is the pie chart. And this is just a general depiction of where our sales taxes are being collected. It represents only the 1 cent sales tax. And the last chart is a historical chart. And it just shows you the red part is the remainder of the year, and the yellow part is where we are today compared to all the other years. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Gentlemen, does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Gwynn. You're welcome. Item number 25, the Revenue and Expenditure Report. Ms. Amanda.
Good evening. Before you are the monthly financial reports for the month of July 2017. Page 1, revenues are at 48.17%, and page 2, expenditures are at 47.69%, at 58.33% of the year. On page 3 are charts that compare year-to-date revenue and expenditures for both operating and capital to the budget. And page 4 and 5 gives you a brief explanation of the funds that are over the budget for revenues and over the budget for expenditures by 5% or more. And the last page reflects all checks from the month of July that were over $100,000, and the total was $2,814,980.01. Once you review the report, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Gentlemen, do you have any questions? I don't hear any, Ms. Amanda. Thank you very much. Item number 26, bid items. To accept the lowest responsive bid as follows. Ms. Jones.
Good evening. On August 24, 2017, the Purchasing Department received 2 bids for crack sealing material. After review, the Purchasing Department and DPW recommend accepting the lowest responsive bid submitted by Covington Sales and Service, and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this material.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion by Councilman Cagnolotti, a second by Councilman Todd Lambert. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
On August 23, 2017, the Purchasing Department received 5 proposals for owners' representation and advisory services. After review, the Non-Engineering Selection Committee recommends accepting the proposal submitted by CSRS and to authorize the parish president to begin contract negotiations for this service.
Motion.
I have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson. Second by Councilman Dempsey Lambert. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. And before we adjourn, I'd like to take a moment to, on behalf of all the members of the Finance Committee, to wish the parish president a happy birthday. We kept him here long enough. And, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
We are adjourned.